So welcome to the final webinar of our Summer Learning Series. My name is Jeremy Clarke. I am the Technology and Learning Platforms Consultant here for Pearson Clinical Assessment. I've been with Pearson since about 2012, had a couple of various roles throughout my tenure here, but I'm happy to be on the clinical side of things and helping all of our users with our technology products. Today's session is going to cover ways to administer assessments with a client at a remote site. Know that it is important to learn about the ethical, legal, and clinical requirements before administering assessments in this mode. Consult your guidelines and requirements from your professional organization and your provincial licensure laws. Today's agenda will cover the following topics: telepractice considerations, QGlobal, QInteractive, our other learning platforms, and then of course our Q&A session. So let's get started with our telepractice considerations. I'll take a couple of minutes to highlight where you can find some ongoing resources to support your work with telepractice or teleassessment. Many of those have been published to our website, as you'll see in this screenshot here. So if you're going to our pearsonclinical.ca webpage, you'll see that there is this banner as the page loads up, and you can certainly hit that link page to get to that particular section, or you can simply type into your web address bar www.pearsonclinical.ca/en for English or FR for French /telepractice. You'll find several helpful documents that guide you through our options, including but not limited to our resource for 100+ digital resources now available in QGlobal. So there's a document that outlines all of those for you. Sending printed record forms for use in telepractice. Our letter of no objection, using facilitators in remote test administration, disinfecting test materials, including PPE considerations. So let's start with the 5 factors, or the 4 factors, I should say, of conducting a telepractice assessment. Conducting a valid assessment in telepractice service delivery model requires an understanding of an interplay of a number of complex issues. In addition to the general information on the Pearson's telepractice overview page, examiners should address these factors when planning to administer and score assessments via telepractice. Let's go ahead and unpack these now. So we'll start with our audio-visual environment. First of all, you'd need computers and connectivity. 2 computers with audio-video capability and a stable internet connection, a web camera, microphone, and speakers or headphones are required for both the examiner and the examinee. The teleconference platform with screen sharing capability is required. Be sure to do a little research when you're looking at a potential platform, as we want to make sure that we have what we call end-to-end encryption, which will allow that we are adhering to our PHIPAA and PHI requirements. For the video, a high-quality video, HD being preferred, is required during the administration. Make sure the full faces of the examiner and the examinee are seen using each respective web camera. The teleconference platform should allow all relevant visual stimuli to be fully visible to the examinee when providing instruction or completing items. The video of the examiner should not impede the examinee's view of the visual stimuli. Of course, you'll also need to be able to screen share those digital components. Always use full screen, i.e. presentation mode, for digital components viewed by the examinee. This provides the cleanest presentation of test content without on-screen distractions like extra toolbars and notifications and that sort of thing. Some of you may be hearing the lovely bird in the background. I promise you that is much better than my lovely 3-year-old in the background. It's a much more pleasing sound, I promise you. Continuing with the audio and visual environment, we're going to talk about the image and the screen size. So when items with visual stimuli are presented, the digital image of the visual stimuli on the examinee's screen should be at least 9.7 inches measured diagonally. That's essentially the size of an iPad or an iPad Air. Some teleconference platforms shrink the size of the images, so the facilitator should verify the image size prior to your testing session. Typically, computer screens used for teleconference assessments are a minimum of 15 inches measured diagonally. Smaller screens, such as an iPad mini or smartphone, are not allowed for examinee-facing content, as these have not been examined empirically and may affect stimulus presentation, examinee response, and the validity of the test results. Gesturing. When gesturing to a stimulus book or response booklet when it's necessary, display them as digital assets on screen and then point using your mouse. Show the paper copy of the stimulus books on your camera if needed and as appropriate. When a response booklet is involved, Immediate and accurate scoring can be achieved if the on-site facilitator holds up the response booklet and you capture a screenshot of each used page upon completion of each subtest. This will also ensure that no responses are lost or altered prior to scoring. The high-quality audio capabilities are required during the administration. An over-the-head two-ear, similar to what I'm using now, stereo headset with attached boom microphone is recommended. You'll notice that for me, I don't have a boom microphone, so many of the newer headpieces don't necessarily require that for good transmission of audio, but you will still want to at least practice and make sure you test out that audio. And of course, that's recommended for both the examiner and the examinee. Test the audio before the examiner and the examinee, test the audio for both the examiner and the examinee prior to the administration. We just want to ensure that we've got high quality environment. Testing the audio may include an informal conversation prior to the administration, where the examiner is listening for any clicks, pops, or breaks in the audio signal. This may distort or interrupt the voice of the examinee, so you want to be sure to catch that. The examiner should also ask the examinee and facilitator if there are any interruptions or distortions in the audio signal on their end. As with any testing session, make sure the examinee's environment is free from audio and visual distractions, including pop-ups or other windows. Ask the examinee and facilitator to close all other applications on the computer, laptop, or other device, and to silence alerts and notifications on the peripheral device to ensure a smooth and fast performance. Establish good overhead and facial lighting for the examiner and the examinee. Not much different there in terms of your paper and pencil environment. You'll want to maintain that for your technology environment as well. This would include closing blinds or shades to reduce sun glare on faces and on the computer screens. For the examiner factors, certainly practice. As many of you were getting started in assessments, you probably heard the line of making sure that you go through 10 sample administrations or test practice administrations in advance of sitting down with a live client. I would take that same methodology when you're looking at telepractice. You just want to make sure that you have the ability to troubleshoot any issues prior to sitting down with a client live. Of course, you want to maintain the standardized procedures as best that you can. We want to maintain that as close to a traditional assessment experience as possible. And then, of course, you want to explain the role of facilitators to not only the facilitator, but also to the examinee. It's mainly going to be to manage the audiovisual needs, but you'll want to make sure that everybody is aware of what their role is during the session. Before initiating test administration, ensure that the examinee is able, prepared, well-rested, and ready to appropriately and fully participate in the telepractice session. Again, explain the role of facilitator to both participants so that everybody is understanding of the actions that may be required. When you're doing your report, you'll want to state in your report that test administration was completed via telepractice and briefly describe the method of telepractice used. For example, the WISC-5 was administered remotely using telepractice, accessing digital stimulus materials on Pearson's QGlobal system. A facilitator monitored the administration on site using a printed response booklet during the live video connection using the Zoom platform or Microsoft Teams platform, whatever that may be. Did you know that on the pearsonclinical.ca webpage, you will find several of our assessments have a telepractice section on their respective product page. So what I'm showing you on screen is the WISC-5. You'll see that there is a specific telepractice tab down towards the bottom third of the page. That will be where you will find all of the telepractice information. These links not only summarize the previously mentioned points here, but they'll also contain assessment-specific considerations when administering via telepractice. So they may talk about things like block design for a WISC-5, for example, and how do you conduct a subtest like that in a telepractice setting. So I encourage you to check that out and do a little reading. It's a nice fireside reading for you. Okay. We're going to go ahead and jump into QGlobal now, and I'll spend a few minutes just chatting about the resources and how to access them within QGlobal. So for those of you that don't know, QGlobal is Pearson's web-based scoring and reporting system. There are also a number of products that allow you to administer directly in the system through our on-screen or remote on-screen administration options. There are now over 100 digital stimulus books and manuals available through our QGlobal resource library. Please note that getting an account for QGlobal has no charge at all. It is just simply looking at the specific test instruments that you want access to or the scoring and reporting options that you would like to utilize. Here is a screenshot of some of the most common or most prevalent on-screen administration options that we have to offer. These can all be used in a remote setting as well. So that means you can send out a secure email link to your rater or client to have them complete the questionnaire or rating scale in the comfort of their own home. Please note that the email is a secure link that is being sent out and does have a 30-day expiration on it. For those of you, again, that are new to QGlobal, you may request your access to the highlighted links on our Telepractice page. Again, please note that there is no licensing fee or requirement for access, but you will require a qualified end user to be registered. This just allows us to ensure that we are providing access to the tools that the individuals are qualified for. Just want to acknowledge that I do see that there are a number of questions coming in, and we will categorize those and address those in our Q&A section. So here's a screenshot of QGlobal. This is what you will see when you first log in, minus potentially the examinee listing that you see. In order to access your digital materials or assets, you will find them in your resource library as highlighted in red at the top. Once you've clicked into your resource library, you can access the 100+ assets added to the platform. You'll see them in the specific product folder. What we're looking at here is the Self 5. You'll notice that there is both a general folder and a restricted folder. The general folder will have general information about that particular assessment. So it may have an about that particular assessment in terms of understanding what the age is, what it's looking at. It may have a sample report and some various options in there. And then in the restricted folder, that's going to be managed about your online digital purchases. So anytime that something's been purchased and allocated to a user, once they'll go into the resource library, they'll see that that restricted folder will then appear, and they'll find their resources under that folder. Again, 100+ assets have been added since March to help professionals like you that may need to conduct telepractice or at least gain access without physically going into the office. This is a safer and more convenient way than your typical library where colleagues share a physical copy of the test kits or stimulus materials. Please keep in mind that there is a promo right now where all of these offerings are being offered at 50% off until December 31st. Here's an example of the WISC 5 stimulus page. So you'll find navigation arrows to move through the digital assets, which will ensure a good orientation of the stimulus view. Using the navigation arrows as opposed to scrolling or using your arrows or page down will also make sure that the orientation of the stimulus is proper and centered in the screen. Whereas if you're just scrolling, it's going to scroll through it just like a regular PDF. Whereas if you use those clickable navigation arrows, it'll automatically center each stimulus image for you. I'm going to spend a few minutes in QInteractive now. I'll first give you a preview of what's available in our QInteractive platform. If you have any questions about specific subtests or specific instruments, please use the chat box to write your question, and we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar. So how can you use QInteractive in the current climate? So for those of you that do have a QInteractive license or you've used it in the past, and for those of you that don't, I'll give you a little bit of a Coles Notes version of how it works. So QInteractive leverages the iPad technology and connects via Bluetooth. So typically that would require a proximity of the two iPads to be within range. That proximity is approximately 10 meters. So it will allow you to maintain your physical distancing if you are seeing clients or children in person. You could even use this in an adjacent room. So you could be next door, or you could be behind plexiglass, or if your setting permits or has the availability of a one-way mirror or that sort of thing, you could certainly use QInteractive through that. There is also a way that we can have the client iPad shared through video conference or telepractice conferencing tools, just like we would with QGlobal. So I'll talk about those as well. So again, we're going to talk about the delivery of the required materials like manipulatives or response booklets. Those are something that you'd have to take into consideration to how do you get the response booklet to your client. And then, of course, how do you get your client iPad to display on your computer screen for that teleconference? Let's take a look at that now. So I'm first going to walk you through screen sharing an iPad to a Mac. In the computer world, there are PCs and there are Macs. And again, we'll start with the Mac. Again, just for those that aren't aware, that is an Apple computer as opposed to a Microsoft Windows-based computer. Screen sharing from an iPad to a Mac only requires your charging cable. It's as simple as it looks on screen. First, connect your iPad to your Mac using this cable. The next thing you'd want to do is open up QuickTime Media Player application on your Mac. From the File menu, select New Movie Recording. Lastly, select iPad from the drop-down in the control panel. I know it's a little small there, but that is the setting that you can see there. In this case, somebody had labeled it Black iPad, just to probably distinguish their practitioner device from the client device. Once you've done that, your iPad will display, and just be sure to go to full screen. You're now ready to begin sharing your screen for the testing session. So again, that is how you would share your Apple iPad to your Apple Mac computer. Now, I understand that although Mac is catching up in terms of prevalence in the market with use of personal home computers, PC is probably still, or Microsoft or Windows-based computers is probably still far and above the most utilized application or software out there. So we'll take a look at how you might conduct this using a PC. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as Windows and Apple don't quite like to play nice in the sandbox. So there is a couple of things that you need to do a little bit differently. So screen sharing an iPad to a PC requires additional software, and there are several different products on the market available that facilitates the screen sharing. Again, be sure to check their hardware and software requirements on their respective sites. And please keep in mind that we are in no way affiliated with any of these companies, and there are many more products than what I've just listed here. I'm just familiar with these personally. The one that I have used the most and am most familiar with is the top one called Reflector. They are now on their third edition or third iteration of it, and it is quite stable. It is what I have used to do QInteractive demonstrations across the country virtually. It allows you to share your iPad screen, very similar to the way that you would screen mirror your iPad to a TV if you wanted to do any sort of streaming of video or audio for that matter. It works very much the same way. You just have to load up your Reflector software on your PC first. You then go into your iPad and you pull down from the top menu and look for the screen mirroring component. You'll see your computer name will pop up there. As soon as you tap that, it will ask you to put in a 4-digit passcode that's going to be provided from the Reflector app on your PC. As soon as you do that, they will pair. The one thing to note about this, in order for that connection to work, both your iPad and your PC have to be on the same network. So if you're using a Wi-Fi connection, make sure that they are both connected to the same Wi-Fi connection. Again, about the mirroring software, it is relatively inexpensive and available for an instant download. Many of them have trials, so you have the ability to try it out before you commit to purchasing. I know the Reflector, I believe, is at a 7 days trial that they have available for you. And I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 or $30, and it's a one-time purchase. It's not a subscription, so it's really quite affordable. For those that may find that that's a little bit cumbersome, or they don't necessarily want to go that route of purchasing additional software to have that, there is what we would call a hybrid model, and that would be leveraging QInteractive and our QGlobal resources. So in this scenario, we'll use the practitioner iPad to record responses, input scores, capture audio, take notes, etc., just like you would in a regular administration using QInteractive. But rather than connecting to your client device, you'll then use the QGlobal digital asset to show the stimulus to the client. So again, that would require having that digital stimulus in your QGlobal library, but then you would show that stimulus through your screen sharing software. Again, it's going to be loaded through the web-based portion of QGlobal for a PDF document that's very easy to share electronically. And then you can use your iPad to document all of the scores, to capture all of the audio recordings if you wanted to. Just keep in mind that if you want to use the audio recordings and you're using a headset like I am, you may want to repeat back the answers that you're hearing, because the iPad will not pick up what they're hearing in your headphones. Just keep in mind again that this would only require the use of a single iPad that will not be connected to the video conference. You will then need to share your stimulus through your resource library in QGlobal with the client. So since the pandemic in March, I think it was March 13th that I was last in the office. How fitting, it was Friday the 13th, if everybody recalls. Since then, as you can imagine, QInteractive and QGlobal have been very active in the market. And what I've seen, as I've had personal touches with both of these products since then, is we've had at least a 20% increase in trial requests for QInteractive and a 30% increase in QGlobal digital resources. And that's probably an underestimate, to be quite honest with you, because sometimes I don't get to see everything. But many school districts and private clinics are now diving into this digital use to explore how we might be able to better serve our clients. So I encourage you to do so. I promise it's not as scary as it may seem, and we are here to assist you. We are here to partner with you in exploring your training and learning needs. So please reach out to your assessment consultants, reach out to myself. We'd be happy to get you set up and walk through various scenarios that might be particular for your cases. I want to spend a few minutes on some learning platforms. I understand that this may not be applicable to everybody in the audience, but for any of our school districts or those that are working with an education facility or education site, I want to share with you some of the telepractice options or digital remote options that we might have available for some of our classroom products. So I'll start with our Review 360 Behavior Matters platform. For those of you that don't know, it's an integrated web-based behavior system designed to help your school and district with all kids. It can be used remotely or in the classroom to screen students, monitor progress, and provide interventions. It gives teachers the training and recommendations based on data to help support student behavior. While Review 360 is typically used via computers, it also works on any web-enabled device, such as a smartphone or tablet, making data collection simple and flexible. Now, it may be a little hard to see, but the little snapshot that I have below the Review 360 blurb, that is just a screenshot that there is also a Telepractice tab on that product listing, so you can learn more about how to do things remotely from that platform. Next, I'll move into our AIMSweb Plus platform. AIMSweb Plus provides the framework, data, and guidance that administrators and teachers need to efficiently allocate and evaluate core instruction and interventions. This helps them improve outcomes for all students based on accurate, continuous, and direct student assessment. It's designed specifically to universally screen, progress monitor, and report data. It also includes assessments for fundamental reading, math, spelling, and writing skills for grades K through 8, as well as norms for K through 12. AIMSweb Plus utilizes browser-based scoring on any device, and it is ideal for an RTI and tiered instruction model. AIMSweb Plus measures can be administered in a telepractice context. There's two different measures that we would follow one procedure. So there is a digital record form, which is embedded directly in the platform. And then there are ones that we call TestNav application, or measures that use the TestNav application, which is Pearson's secure online testing platform. And those would follow another. Again, please refer to the Telepractice tab for more details or remote testing on either of these platforms. Lastly is the Developmental Reading Assessment 3rd edition, or as we live in acronyms here at Pearson, the DRA3. This provides the ability to administer and score benchmark assessments in real time, allow you to review and track student progress over time through a student, class, school, or district lens, generate user-friendly and in-depth reports with access to online support and digital resources for both teachers and administrators. You'll notice that I don't have the Telepractice tab in there just yet, but there is something in the works. It's not official yet, but there may be something we're looking at to provide the benchmark books digitally. It's still being worked on, and it's very infant in its stages, but I hope to share more information with you shortly on that. And with that, that is going to conclude the content of our session today. And I want to now address some of your questions that you've asked throughout the time together. Okay. So is it possible to do a telepractice assessment without a facilitator? I would say yes, it's possible, but in this case, you'd want to use your best judgment. As I mentioned, the use of the facilitator is really to make sure that you're managing those audiovisual needs. They may also help with, if you're sending out a response booklet, making sure that that stays closed before starting the administration that you're opening it up on camera. That is one thing that we also would recommend, is that if you're sending out that response booklet, send it in a sealed envelope, and please ask them not to open it up in advance of the session, and that you want to see it on camera as it's opened up. So yes, it is possible, but again, you want to use your best judgment to make sure that you're still excuse me, that you're still managing that relationship with the client as best you can in this particular scenario. The next question, can you explain the no objection letter, its purpose? Yes, I'd be happy to. So the no objection letter that we've posted allows permission to show our digital stimulus materials digitally through technology, through Telepractice. This is new. This typically would have broken copyright because you would be sharing that publicly, so to speak, through a video conferencing session. So traditionally that would not have been allowed prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, but that is one of the things that we have allowed users to do, is to be able to screen share, to be able to share that resource via technology with your participants at the other end. I have a question about the CVLTC. I'm going to just skip that one just for now, and I'll come back to it. Is it possible to do telepsych assessments without using iPad admin of tests like the WACE? It is. We have, I believe, some of the resources are available. We're still working on the last finishing touches on the stimulus books for the WACE 4 through our QGlobal library. But yes, you will have access to the stimulus book and the resources through QGlobal for the WACE 4. The next question that I have here is, which iPads are recommended? I heard some do not work. I'm not sure about the some do not work, but that may be a very outdated or older device. Right now, we are supporting operating systems 10, 11, 12, and 13, which would be essentially your iPad 4th generation, 5th generation, 6th generation, 7th generation. iPad Air, iPad Pros are all supported as well. An iPad Mini is supported for the practitioner device, but not for the client. And again, that is to maintain standardized administration size for the stimulus. With that being said, September is traditionally the year that Apple publishes their new operating system, where they are going to iOS 14. This is a big change for Apple and for us, and it will unfortunately mean that we will be sunsetting support for iOS 10, and 11. So as of the iOS 14 release in September, iPads that can run iOS 12, iOS 13, and iOS 14 will be able to use the brand new offers of QInteractive. I say that specifically because if you are using one of our current products today and there are no changes to your battery in the next release, you would still be able to use your older devices even if it can't run those operating systems I just mentioned. It just means that when there is a new test offered, you would not have access to that new test until you upgrade your devices. So I hope that makes sense, but for anybody that is interested in discussing that further, I certainly encourage you to reach out. Next question. At our clinic, can more than one examinee access the same test on QInteractive? Can more than one examinee access the same test on QInteractive? So the answer is yes. It would require a separate login for those two examiners. The examinee access is all going to be specific to the examiner that sets them up. Each independent user of QInteractive on your account would have their own independent login and independent access to use the test materials. They can share the same test library, and we can even set up the system in such a way that your users can share the same results view of all examinees completed. And what I mean by that is there's a way that we can set up multiple users for QInteractive so that they only see the patient files or the examinee files that they're working on, or we can open that up so that the users can see all examinee records as they're going through. As for accessing the same test, if you're talking about can two users share the same login and test simultaneously, the answer to that is no. You would need to have unique users for each of your testers for simultaneous access. I'm going to go through one more scenario. If we're talking about a clinic that maybe has a part-time staff member and there's 2 part-time staff members that maybe share a set of iPads throughout the week, they could, again, they'll still need their own unique usernames, but you wouldn't necessarily need to spend money on separate license access points for each of them, because you can move your active license from one user to another. It would just be a small administrative step to get the current active seat, if you will, to the user that needs it for that day of testing. Okay, so we'll go ahead, and that CVLTC question, understanding that scoring is not available, I'm assuming we're referencing the QInteractive platform. That is not absolutely correct. You absolutely will have access to the scoring. The one thing that is lacking with the CVLTC is the ability to produce a comprehensive score report. The reporting option is not available in QInteractive for the CVLTC, and I'll take the time to mention that it is also not available for the DCAFs, the NEPC2, or the WACE4. All of the products on QInteractive would have a built-in reporting mechanism, but again, don't confuse that with scores. You are absolutely going to get the scores and the data that you require. It is just not going to be presented with a report or score format that you might be used to. The next one that we have here is, I'm new to telepractice and I may need some hand-holding. Will there be somebody who can help me? Absolutely there will be. That is what we're here for. Myself and any of our area assessment consultants are well versed in our products and tools, and we can certainly talk through any scenarios. If we don't know the answer, we will find it out for you. We have the ability to tap into our research and development teams, and they can help us with some of the guidelines that we've published and some of the resource that we have available. So absolutely, we are here to help. Next question is, okay, how long is a trial for? So the trial for QInteractive is 30 days. That 30-day trial period will get you access to the entire library that the users are qualified for, and you will be able to get scores and generate reports when appropriate or when applicable for all of that. So you do not need to stay within kind of a practice mode. You have full access to the system for those 30 days, provided that you've got a qualified user set up. The next question is, I'm not sure I understand what the client is using their part of the virtual assessment. Not sure I understand what the client is using for their part of the virtual assessment. So I'm assuming you're talking about when we're using a teleconference or video conferencing session, and essentially all the client needs is a PC or tablet device, something that's going to have a large enough screen that they can see you. All they need is a camera and the audio component so that they can see you just like you're seeing me right now, and then they can see the stimulus as you're presenting them. There's nothing in terms of them actually filling out the responses on screen in that case. They're not going to be interactively touching the screen. They're simply going to be able to view the stimulus that you show. Hope that helps. Again, if I wasn't quite getting the answer to your question there, feel free to reach out. What about the use of a document camera? Great question, and absolutely this is something that I've had a number of conversations on, and it is recommended certainly for those that have paper copies of your stimulus materials and you do not want to necessarily purchase a digital copy. You can absolutely use a document camera. You can check out on our YouTube channel, some of our US some of our US support-based users have recorded a video for a document camera hack. And this is essentially a way to replicate a document camera without having to spend the dollars that a document camera actually needs. So be sure to check that out. But essentially, all you want to maintain with that document camera is that the full stimulus can be shown without distortion through your Telepractice page. What if the child is not very comfortable around the facilitator, i.e. a parent? That's a great question, and that is certainly something that you would want to explore and you'd want to flush out before you're sitting down and actually doing this presentation or doing this administration. These are the considerations that you would need to use your professional judgment in. You would need to judge the relationship that you already have with that examinee, that child, and or that parent, and decide if whether or not a remote testing experience is really going to garner the results that you're looking for. I will say that this is not a one-size-fits-all. This is not a black or white response. There's a lot of gray here, as you can imagine, and a lot of this are recommendations and suggestions provided by us, but it's up to the clinicians ultimately whether or not they go forward with that administration. And I think that that is a very good question to be asked, because if you do feel that you're not going to get the best performance of the child because of that facilitator in the room, maybe that's not the best environment for them to take the assessment in. So will there be, or is there a demo video that shows the QInteractive process, telepractice-wise? Unfortunately, there will not. And the reason for this is because then we would be showing live test items, and we do not want to take the risk of having any test items displayed live or accessible on the web. Now, that being said, I would recommend you to reach out to me or one of the assessment consultants, and we can provide a one-to-one demo where we can show you kind of that demonstration or that process about connecting and making sure that you've got the active. I've got a copy reflector. I know a couple of my colleagues do as well, so we can absolutely mimic what you would do in your home or office environment, but we will not have a recorded video or demo of that because we just don't want to risk, those items and those things getting out into the global world, if you will. Here is another question. I recently purchased the WIS5 kit before COVID. Is it possible to return the kit and get set up with QGlobal? If this is not a good platform to answer this, please let me know. I can check with. So I think that's a good question. I think that is going to be a case-by-case basis. It's going to be something that depends on when you purchased it, how you purchased it. But absolutely, I would recommend that you follow up with either myself or your assessment consultant, and we can look into that and we can check what our return policy would be with our customer service team. Without officially knowing, I would say that you still have, I would say there's a very likely chance that yes, we would probably be able to return that kit and get you set up with digital options instead. Thank you for that comment. Just somebody said, thank you very much. Nice to know there is support. I just want to reiterate, absolutely, don't feel like you're doing this alone. We may not have all the answers right away, but we will certainly find out and do our very best to get you the answers that you need. So please do leverage your consultants. Does the same apply to QGlobal? Can more than one user access the digital stimulus books in the resource library at the same time? So the same methodology or same thinking would apply that I mentioned with QGlobal, in that it wouldn't be something that could simultaneously be accessed, but you could move that allocation of that digital asset from one user to another. So think about it, the way I best describe this with customers is think about your assessment library in your traditional setting, whether it be a paper and pencil, and you've got various clinicians that are checking out. If you don't have a kit for everybody, then they've got to share a stimulus book or a stimulus manual. Well, you can't have two users testing two different kiddos with the same stimulus book at the same time, so you won't be able to do that simultaneously. But once one clinician is finished, you can pass that to the next clinician to then complete their testing. The same thing can be applied with QGlobal. Are there any sanitary advantages to using QGlobal stimulus books, even if I assess in person? I would say absolutely there are. If you think about the number of pages, paper pages that are in a stimulus book, the number of touch points that a kiddo or a clinician may have access to that, having to wipe down every single page or having to wipe down after each administration, you can imagine is going to be very difficult and sometimes cumbersome, where with a digital asset, the rest you don't need to do. What is the best way to clean my iPad? Great question. So there are a number of products on the market. I think probably 2 years ago, I would have said, do not use any solvents or any kind of soap or disinfectants and that sort of thing. Just use a microfiber cloth to wipe it down. Now that obviously we're in this pandemic and we want to get some bacteria away from the devices and that sort of thing, there are safe wipes. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but you can look at your local Best Buy, Staples, whatever your technology shop of choice is, online, whatever the case may be. There are safe, sanitary, they may be slightly alcohol-based. I can't speak for that specifically, but there are certainly wipes that would help facilitate that cleaning. Some people are using single-use pointers to make it easier to use paper in person without having to clean the entire test. That's a great way to do that as well, so that you're not having the client actually touch the paper itself, but they're touching with a pointer. I mean, you could theoretically do that with a pencil. the end of a pencil if you really wanted to. You just want to make sure that you're maintaining that distance and things aren't touching the paper book, that sort of thing. But certainly that is another way to go about it. If you are seeing patients in person and you want to get outfit with your PPE and you're just using a pointer to direct them on the paper stimulus, that would absolutely work. I've also had conversations with people that have used the sheets that you used to put in school. You'd put one sheet inside a cellophane plastic wrap, and then you'd be able to do it. You could do that. You could do like an acetate to clean, that sort of thing as well. But you could have a divider, almost like a clear sheet divider between your pages that may help with that facilitation as well. So it just helps maintain the number of touch points to your paper materials. So that's the idea when you're looking at continuing to use some of your paper materials, is you want to maintain the best way to clean and sanitize those materials to get ready for the next examinee. And for that matter, the examiner. You don't want to just think about the examinee, because in many cases, there's a number of clinicians that may be using the same materials. And you want to make sure that at each time that they're being used, that they're also being cleaned and sanitized. So again, be sure to check out our PPE section. There's a letter in the website that explains how to safely sanitize many of our materials, what our recommendations would be, and how to use that PPE. So be sure to check that out again on the Telepractice page. We've just got a few more questions, and I know we've got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to do my very best to get through them all. If you do have any last minute questions, by all means, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I'll do my best to address them. Using QGlobal or QInteractive, if my computer or iPads freeze or crash while scoring or administering a test, will everything be lost, or is it there in autosave capability in this platform is allowing one to start back where they left off? Great question. It's a couple of different scenarios depending on QGlobal and QInteractive. I'll start with QGlobal. It is web-based, so as you're going through, it will save as you go. It is always connected to the internet as you're going through because it is web-based. So yes, if anything were to crash in the middle of the administration or while you're showing that digital stimulus, when you're looking at an on-screen administration, you're more focused about the crashing of the computer, and it will save that last item that was answered. If you're looking at utilizing your digital stimulus materials, it's simply just going to mean you're going to have to reopen your materials to the appropriate page that you left off at. So you may need to find your place, but that would be the worst of it. For QInteractive, I'm going to mention two scenarios here because QInteractive has what we call an offline mode. So for users that are going into remote communities or going into rural areas where you're not sure about the Wi-Fi connection, you can load all of your tests in advance of going out on your trip, have them locally stored on your iPad, and you are not then dependent on connecting to an internet connection to go about your administration. In that scenario, when you're offline, if something were to crash or freeze, the local system will pick up and remember where you were, what you were doing, that sort of thing. But if the physical iPad is lost or damaged and you can't get back into the iPad, unfortunately, you will be locked out of the data. You will be locked out of what you completed because it's offline and it's only stored on the iPad at that time. You can, however, if your area, your environment is allowing you to connect to the Wi-Fi, it is best practice to continue that Wi-Fi connection or that internet connection while testing, because even if your iPad were to completely crash or break or you can no longer access it, it will be automatically backed up to our server so that you can access the points that you've already completed, all of the scoring that you've already completed, all of the administrations that you've already done will be backed up there for you. So yes, both systems do provide that backup. QInteractive is a little bit different because it has an offline mode. I hope that helps. You were going to talk about block design. Did I miss that? I didn't specifically talk about block design, but I will say that if you go to the WISC-5 Telepractice page, it will specifically talk about block design. It will give you a couple of various scenarios. The Coles Notes version is you can use the WISC-5 integrated to do the block design multiple choice, but just keep in mind with the integrated, that is a US-based normed test. So you would have to convert your WISC-5 Canadian scores to US to incorporate that, but then you can always convert them back. And then the other option would be to do a substitution with visual puzzles, but that would be a little bit limiting in terms of what index scores and what other scores that you may be able to obtain. But I certainly recommend that you jump onto the WISC-5 product page, go into that Telepractice tab, and that will be explained there for you. For the offline testing, how much storage will the average test require, user and test? Great question. Not much at all, to be quite honest with you. I have been in conferences where I don't have great connectivity to Wi-Fi or internet, and I have had upwards of 50 assessments loaded on my iPad at any one time. So just for those users that are thinking about QInteractive and going into those remote settings, the test content itself is already going to be preloaded into the iPad. What you are then assigning to the iPad is the specific configuration for your client and what you're accessing from the subtest that you've set up. Sorry. So there's not much space difference in terms of whether or not you've got an assessment on there or you don't, because it's all going to be storing the test materials, stimulus materials, all that sort of thing is already going to be on the iPad, regardless of the test that you've already set up. Where some of the space is going to be taken up is the audio recordings. So the more verbally mediated subtests you have, the more audio recordings you have on your device, the more storage you will require. That being said, I have not even scratched the surface. If you're exclusively using QInteractive on your iPad and you're not using it for any streaming or movies or anything like that, I don't suspect that you'll run into any storage issues, even at a 32 gigabyte level. Now, if you're using that device to do other things as well, that's something you might want to consider about what other space and storage is being taken up on that device. So I hope that helps. In order to use QGlobal or QInteractive, you must have internet access, correct? So if we go out to a socially distanced assessment and internet is not available, these types of assessments would not work and only paper-based assessment would be the option. Well, not quite. So in the first, what I think I just described with QInteractive in the offline version, that would allow you to maintain your socially distanced without having internet connection. You would only require the internet in the beginning to get your test battery set up and to get everything loaded. And then once you've downloaded that locally to your iPad, you can then go about your testing without being connected to the internet. So yes, you can maintain that socially distanced with your iPad without access to the internet. QGlobal, you are correct. It is a web-based platform. It would require an active internet connection to be able to show the digital stimulus. Again, if you have any additional questions, here is my contact information. You can reach me by email, jeremy.clarke@pearson.com, or you can reach me toll free at 1-800-268-2132. You may also contact the assessment and technology consultant for your own region. Once again, thank you very much, everybody. It's been my pleasure. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.